Are you waking up 2, 3, 5 times a night just to stand at the toilet, half asleep, waiting on a bladder that used to let you sleep straight through? I was, for years, and I finally learned why from, of all people, the pharmacist who'd been filling my blood pressure prescription every month for a decade. And it wasn't the reason either of us expected. I'm 83 now. I sleep through most nights without getting up at all, and when I do, it's once, not 5 or 6 times. I say that not to brag. I say it because 4 years ago I would have laughed at anyone who told me that was possible for a man my age. Nearly 1 in 5 men over 60 is walking around with a magnesium level low enough to affect muscle function, and nobody ever tests for it at a checkup. That shortfall turned out to be a bigger part of my nights than the prostate itself. Here's what most men assume. They assume a tired bladder at night is just the plumbing wearing out, same as everything else wears out after 80 years of use. But that's not quite what's happening in there, and by the end of this, you'll know exactly what is. I'm 83. I sleep through the night now, most nights, without ever leaving the bed. I empty in one trip when I do get up, not the start-stop, half-finished business I dealt with for years. And I plan my days around what I want to do, not around where the nearest restroom happens to be. For years, before any of that was true, my nights went like this. Lights out around 9:30, asleep by 10, awake by midnight, feet on a cold floor, shuffling down a dark hallway toward a bathroom I could have found blindfolded, because I basically did half the time. Then again around 2, then again closer to 4, when it wasn't even worth trying to fall back asleep, so I'd just sit in the kitchen with the lights off, waiting for the sun. My wife used to ask, gently, if I was okay. I'd say I was fine. I wasn't fine. I was exhausted in a way that coffee couldn't touch, the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes all day and makes you short-tempered with people you love. I stopped offering to drive at night. I stopped planning early mornings with my grandsons because I never knew what kind of shape I'd be in. There's a particular kind of humiliation in it that men don't talk about. You raise a family, you build a career, you spend 50 years being the one people rely on, and then you're standing in a dark hallway at 2 in the morning, gripping the wall, waiting on a body that won't cooperate. I didn't tell my friends. I barely told my own doctor the full truth of it because some part of me was ashamed, like admitting it made me less of a man. I know now that's a foolish way to suffer, but at the time, it felt like the only option was to carry it quietly and hope it didn't get worse. It got worse. What started as 1 extra trip a night crept up to 4, sometimes 5. I started mapping bathrooms before I left the house, at the grocery store, at church, at my son's place. I turned down a fishing trip with old friends because I couldn't picture surviving 2 nights in a cabin with 1 bathroom and 3 other men. That's the part nobody warns you about. It's not just the sleep, it's the way the fear of it starts running your whole life. I told myself it was just age. Everyone told me that. My doctor, when I finally brought it up, nodded like he'd heard it 1,000 times before, because he had, and told me it was common in men my age, part of the territory. 8 minutes, a pat on the back, next patient. He wasn't wrong that it's common. He just never had the time to explain why. What I eventually learned, standing at the pharmacy counter one afternoon waiting on a refill, is that the story is bigger than the prostate presses on things. She noticed the list of what I was picking up, a diuretic, a blood pressure pill, and asked, almost in passing, whether anyone had ever checked my magnesium. That question led to a longer conversation than either of us expected for a Tuesday at the counter. That part about the prostate is true. An enlarged prostate does squeeze the tube that carries urine out, which is part of why the stream gets weaker and the bladder never quite finishes its job. But there's a second piece almost nobody talks about, and it has nothing to do with the prostate directly. It's the muscle wall of the bladder itself. That wall is smooth muscle, the same category of muscle that lines your blood vessels and your gut. And smooth muscle needs a specific mineral to relax properly instead of firing off little false alarms. When that mineral runs low, and it runs low in a huge share of older adults, especially men who've been on blood pressure medication or diuretics for years, which flushes it out faster than the diet replaces it, the bladder wall gets twitchy. It sends "I'm full, go now" signals, even when there's only a small amount sitting in there. That's not your prostate lying to you. That's an irritable muscle wall lying to you, on top of whatever the prostate is already doing to your flow. She put it to me plainly, right there at the counter with a line forming behind me. She said most men she rings up assume there's only one villain behind their nighttime trips, the prostate, and they're surprised to learn there's a second one riding along with it, quieter, easier to miss, and in a lot of cases easier to actually do something about. The prostate is mechanical. It's tissue pressing on a tube. You can support it, but you can't talk a gland into shrinking overnight. The bladder wall, though, responds to what you feed it and what you do in the hours before bed. That's the part within reach. She also told me something that stuck with me, that the reason this gets missed so often isn't neglect, it's math. A standard doctor's appointment runs somewhere around 8 minutes. There's barely time to check a blood pressure cuff and renew a prescription, let alone walk a patient through 2 separate mechanisms feeding the same nighttime symptom. It's not that your doctor doesn't know, it's that nobody's built the system to give him the time to explain it to you. She sees it every day, filling the same prescriptions for men who never got the fuller picture. For 11 years, the bathroom ran my nights. Up at midnight, up at 2. Up again at 5, a weak little stream each time and never quite empty. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, knowing I'd drag through the next day half awake. I thought it was just age. It wasn't. Here's what no one ever sat me down to explain. The prostate crowds the channel your urine runs through, so the bladder never fully drains, it just fills right back up within the hour. That's why you go and go again. It was never weakness. It was never getting old. And the pills they kept handing me, they left me dizzy every time I stood, gave me that strange, dry finish where almost nothing came, and the nights never changed. But there is a gentle way to help that bladder empty the way it's meant to, without any of that. At 83, I finally sleep through the night again. I'll show you exactly what in this video, and if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. The mineral is magnesium. And the reason a spoonful matters more than a pill, at least in my case, is that ground pumpkin seed, 1 tablespoon, crushed or ground into something like a course meal, stirred into a small glass of warm water about an hour before bed, happens to be one of the richest ordinary food sources of magnesium there is, alongside a modest dose of zinc that's long been associated with healthy prostate tissue. Research into magnesium's role in muscle and sleep has pointed the same direction for years. When the mineral is adequate, smooth muscle relaxes the way it's supposed to, and that includes the bladder wall. It's not a cure, it's not going to shrink anything. What it appears to do, according to what I've read and what that pharmacist explained to me over the counter, is calm down the false alarms so the bladder only signals when it's actually time. I didn't stop there because one habit alone rarely turns a decade of bad nights around. She walked me through it like a short checklist on an index card she scribbled on the spot, and I've kept to it ever since. First, the tablespoon of ground pumpkin seed in warm water about an hour before bed every night. Not as a supplement stacked on supplements, just food, the way my grandmother would have served it. Second, I stopped drinking anything with caffeine after 2 in the afternoon, because caffeine acts as both a bladder irritant and a mild diuretic, meaning it does the opposite of what you want right when you're trying to wind down. Third, I cut off fluids generally about 2 to 3 hours before lights out, not thirsty myself into misery, just stopped topping off the tank late in the evening. Small system, 3 parts, and every part pulling the same direction. I'm 83, and I sleep in the same bed as my wife of 51 years, and most nights now I don't leave it once before sunrise. That's not something I say lightly. For a long stretch of my 70s, I thought that part of my life was simply over, that waking up rested was a young man's privilege I'd forfeited. These days, I take the early flight when I visit my daughter instead of dreading the layover and the bathroom hunt through a strange airport. I sit through a full 2-hour church service without doing the math on where the nearest restroom is or how fast I could get there. I went on that fishing trip I'd turned down for 3 years running, and I didn't think about the bathroom once. That's not nothing. That's my whole life handed back to me. I think about a man named Wendell, 76, who wrote in after hearing about this from a neighbor. He'd been up 4 to 5 times a night for over a decade and had genuinely started to believe it was simply how the rest of his life would go. He started with the pumpkin seed habit and the fluid timing, stuck with it for about 6 weeks, and told his family he'd forgotten what 4 straight hours of sleep felt like. I'm not sharing that as proof it works for everyone, bodies are different, and his doctor still checks his numbers regularly, same as mine does. I'm sharing it because it's exactly the kind of quiet turnaround that never makes headlines, but changes a man's whole day. None of what I'm describing replaces your doctor or whatever treatment plan you're already on. If you're taking medication for your prostate or your bladder, keep taking it. Keep your appointments and talk to your doctor before changing anything. This is something you do alongside your care, never instead of it. What I'm telling you is that there's a piece of this puzzle that rarely gets explained in a rushed appointment. And once I understood it, a habit that costs pennies a night gave me back something I thought was gone for good. So here's what I use: a few drops every single morning. And let me be honest about why it works. One herb on its own nudges one thing, but your prostate answers best when several signals are calmed at the same time: the flow, the emptying, the pressure behind it. That's why what I take brings them together, concentrated, working as one, not a single ingredient hoping to do everything. Stronger stream, full emptying, quiet nights, your freedom back. And none of the trade-offs, no dizziness, no dry finish, nothing taken from you as a man. It's linked right under this video. Go see it for yourself. It won't replace good sleep or your own doctor. It's there to support your body. At 83, I sleep through. It is not too late for you. What I want you to walk away with is this: the bathroom doesn't have to run your nights. I spent over a decade assuming my body had simply worn out, that this was the toll of getting old and there was nothing to do but accept it. I was wrong about that, and I wish someone had corrected me sooner. I think about the man I was at 79, sitting in a dark kitchen at 4 in the morning, too tired to be angry, too proud to tell anyone how bad it had gotten. And I think about the man I am now, 83, sleeping next to my wife through the night, waking up rested, planning my days around what I want to do instead of around the nearest bathroom. That's dignity. That's independence. That's what I'd want for any man reading this who still thinks it's just age. If you get up at night more than you'd like, tell me in the comments how many times. I read every single one, and I want to know I'm not the only one who lived this. And if any of this helped you see your own nights a little differently, subscribe, because there's more of what I've learned coming, and I don't want you to miss it.